Welcome to the HR Uprising podcast. This podcast series explores HR hot topics and challenges through conversations with relevant experts and real-life HR, learning, and OD professionals. The HR Uprising is about learning through collaboration and evidence-based action. We want colleagues to have the confidence and skills to rise up through their organizations by delivering real, lasting business value. Now, introducing your host, chartered psychologist, experienced change agent, entrepreneur, speaker, and coach, Lucinda.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the HR Uprising. And this week is one of our conversations with episodes. And the topic we're going to talk about is crowdsourcing talent. So if you don't know what that's about, then you soon will. I'm really pleased to have a guest with me, a lady called Juliet Eccleston, who is the founder and CEO of AnyGood, which is a crowdsourcing talent platform. We're here to talk about that whole space. In terms of background to Juliet, we actually met a year ago, didn't we?
Yes.
On the PwC programme where we were looking at technology, HR techs and various things like that. And because we're both in the HR space, we definitely found an affinity, didn't we, in terms of trying to help with the challenges. Why I wanted to get Juliet on the programme was because I know that there's a lot that she can say which resonates with the challenges that we have in HR in terms of trying to demonstrate greater value as being more strategic, the whole challenges around demonstrating business value. And I know that that's the sort of thing that your clients are often struggling with. And
Absolutely.
So that we'd explore that a little bit.
Yes.
In a sort of disrupting, as I've said before, this isn't an area I know a lot about, recruitment. So it's always good to talk more to people who do.
Sure.
So in terms of, obviously, AnyGood is a crowdsourcing tech platform, and we can allude to that later, but the purpose of this is really about, I suppose, discussing the challenges that both our clients might have in this space.
Yes.
What would you say as being the problem, if you like, as to why you felt AnyGood needed to be set up?
Yes, certainly. I mean, my experience, as you say, I'm experienced now in recruitment, but largely it was through being a hiring manager myself and experiencing those issues myself. And really the things that I found that were most a challenge were trying to find that value for money from a service, specifically around quality of hires, quality of candidates coming through a pipeline. The cost of the service that I was paying for seemed to be too much for the value that I was getting back, and the efficiency of the process as well. So it was all three elements really where I found that recruitment seemed to be quite far behind other industries in terms of new things that were happening to make things much better than they were historically.
So what's interesting to me is, I suppose, for my audience out here, which is kind of HR, you were actually a customer of HR.
Absolutely.
And where we as business, as HR, we're increasingly expecting managers to take on various aspects of the process, but you were having difficulty in delivering against it because of the systems that you had and getting the talent you had and the time and various aspects of it.
Yes.
So therefore, I suppose, so in terms of the solution, in terms of how HR were able to help you, it was quite hands-off. You were having to do it all yourself, were you?
Yes, yeah. So my background is all in delivering large-scale technology change programs. So I'm quite familiar with the technology side of things. And as somebody that was constantly needing to set up new programs and deliver change, I was in a position where I needed to build high-performing teams, find top people, subject matter experts, and people that we could rely on to deliver time and time again, and found very much that the best people that we were getting through were through recommendation, and I'm sure that's no surprise to people listening in terms of the best source of hires, but there was no way to make that scalable. So we still needed to rely on agencies that were often on a PSL alongside the recommendations that were coming through, and there was such a vast difference between the two types of candidates that we would get through, really wanting to have much more reliance on the recommendation route than we were able to, and not being entirely sure about how much we could rely on those coming through agencies and how long they would stay, what the quality would be like, certainly feeling like that we were paying over the odds for the candidates coming through as well.
Okay, so I can see that the challenge there, and fundamentally the solution, and it's interesting you say that in terms of referrals. I think back to when I've been in corporate organisations, they would often introduce a referral program to reduce the cost of hire. And actually, I didn't know that the success rate was high, but I would say in my own business, the the people who've come through referral have always been better. It's almost like there's a pre-culture fit or something that goes on as well. Yeah. But it's quite tricky to get those referrals.
It is, yes.
So this is about formalising or enabling it, or
and so really looking at the what works within an industry or what works within a process. As I say, my background was all change, so I'm very used to looking at how something's working historically and finding a new way for it to work, and then delivering a technology solution for that. So whether it's looking at what the most lean process is, or how to reduce waste in a process, all of those kinds of things I'm very familiar with. And that's why I got so frustrated, I think, with recruitment, was because it felt like there was lots of waste in the process. There were handoffs, there was inefficiencies, there was areas where information wasn't being shared when I felt like it should be more open and transparent, and generally a low level of trust within that relationship. And if all of those things were reversed somehow and based on a process that already works really well, which is recommendations and referrals, then and that was my frustration really, and what kind of started the whole theory off around crowdsourced talent, was that would be much better if you could have recommendations at scale that solved all of those other issues that we saw in recruitment as well.
And that's the point, isn't it, the scale? Because the reason things probably don't take off is that I might have loads of mates but am I going to have someone who is going to be a good person for your job?
That's right.
Not necessarily, but they could be for someone else's job, and it's about...
Absolutely.
It's almost like the LinkedIn, but a more... again, possibly trusted one, I suppose, that's less gained, maybe.
Yes, yeah.
In terms of where you were seeing as the breakdown in trust, were there any particular places that you saw that was a problem in terms of process?
Yeah, I mean, both on the candidate side and on the client side, it felt as if, and I think we have this a lot with when there's an intermediary in the middle of a process. Yeah. Certainly, estate agents have gone through the same kind of thing, and they've already experienced much more disruption than recruitment has. It can be hard for both sides to trust when they're not dealing with one another directly, because the intermediary often has things that they need to do quite rightly. They need to make some money. They're really often are very much targeted to get candidates into roles, and so the motivation often is questioned, even if that recruitment agent is brilliant, because of the industry. Often you don't know if the reason some of the behaviours are happening is because they've got their own targets to meet, or other things that are going on in the middle of that relationship. Whereas if it's a direct relationship between the candidate and the client, and the platform just enables that, it enables that to be much more of a trusted conversation when you just introduce a candidate to a client, and then they carry on the conversation within their own internal process.
I can see that. I mean, I can see that ourselves when we use, and the other, it's a very good analogy with estate agents, and I apologise, I'll have a recruitment agency on at some point who can tell us how amazing, and I know there are lots of agencies and headhunters who do add tremendous value.
Absolutely.
But it can feel like you're spending a hell of a lot of money might be just they're lucky that they've got that candidate, and I never quite know how broadly they are, how good that selection is of candidates.
Yes.
Because how do they have a big list? They haven't got the whole market, have they?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that's one of the things that we saw, was that in terms of the talent pools that are often used by agencies or other technology platforms, where there are where they're doing candidate matching to roles, it's limited pools of talent that are there for historical reasons, and then and it's quite difficult for them to tap into new talent pools, whether that's women returning to work, or people of a certain age, or in certain demographics, or people with disabilities that need more flexibility at work. Trying to tap into those different groups can be quite hard when you've got sort of a large history of a talent pool that you're working with. Whereas where you have something that is more proactively curated to specifically draw in people that are from different demographics and different talent pools, then it allows that network to be much more like how society is today, so much more of a representation of society. And certainly we rely on that to make sure that that if we have the representation of society, and then they're more likely to recommend people outside of traditional talent pools and know different types of people. So although we very much focus on diversity. We don't really talk about being a diversity solution. We just have a good representation of society, and I kind of feel like everybody should. So we're not necessarily, as I say, a solution for that. Even though I often get asked to speak at events on diversity, I just feel like we do it right in terms of including everybody.
Because it's interesting. So I'm thinking, I can think of a couple of agencies that I am aware of. One that I think does military, and one that does. It attracts sort of returners to work because it's the hours, it's about flexible, and it's a really good message. But they just do that. Whereas what you're saying is you're kind of you're opening it up to everybody in terms of your model. It's being inclusive across the piece. Yeah. And I guess, you know, I know we said we weren't going to plug the platform as such, because that's not what we do, but it's probably helpful for you to explain what it is, otherwise people will wonder what AnyGood is. So go ahead.
Yeah, so basically we have a network of professionals, so it can be anybody that you know, yourself and people that you know who join our network, and they see roles from clients that share it with our network, and they think about who they know that would be great for that role. Check to see if they'd like to be put forward for it, and put them forward with a recommendation if they would. So basically it allows clients to receive recommended candidates for roles. They, just like you would on Uber and Airbnb, you would then have the opportunity to rate the quality of that recommendation. And so it allows us to control the quality of membership and to see what data is coming through. And then it drops straight into an internal hiring process. So it's very light from a platform perspective. It's not, you know, we don't go into a lot of the added value, in fact, that some of the agencies provide around interview management or psychometric testing and additional extras. It's very much an introduction platform where we simply introduce people that have been recommended specifically for roles by people that know them best.
And so it could sit alongside the other things that you're doing, but it basically enriches and gives credibility to it, and almost sort of enables the referenceability piece of things, and particularly probably in specialist roles, I'm imagining, because that's often the harder ones, because you don't know as many of them. You know, if it was a job that anyone can do, you might know more people about it. But absolutely. We often have the hard to find roles that are shared with us just to see who people know, and we can predict a lot of the types of responses we get, especially for sort of very standard roles. So like program manager roles, we know that we'll have a great response within 48 hours because you're kind of getting straight to the source of who knows who. And then we'll have some more different roles, like, you know, we've gone beyond the UK in terms of having roles, you know, a legal role in Singapore and a project manager role in the Outer Hebrides and things like that. We will get those because you never know who people know, and people are so well connected today, and that's what it's based on, is how much people are connected. And the bigger the pool and bigger your contacts, the better it is for people to identify them. And then in terms of the cost of it, though, because the people think, is this going to cost as much as me having a headhunting or otherwise? How does that compare?
So it's not as time costly for us as it is for a headhunter, so we are definitely cheaper. So an example of a role that we've hired for recently was a CTO role, and it was actually it wasn't in the UK, it was in Spain as well, so even harder. And so our cost for that was £6,500. Whereas, you know, their package would have been well over 100,000, and so that would have been significantly more than £6,500.
Okay, so that's interesting. So if you're in an HR role and you're being targeted on reducing your recruitment costs, for example, this could be something useful. So do you have to pay to have the platform?
No. So it's free for clients to share roles, free to see who we've got in terms of candidates. It's only a cost if somebody's hired for the role. So
it's a possible no-brainer to add to if you've got something to.
And likewise for members, actually. In fact, I've been asked whether it costs members to join, because I think there are other platforms out there where members have to actually pay. But there's no fee for members to join. In fact, we obviously share part of the hiring fee with our members, but we also share profit with members as well. So it's very much more of a shared value platform.
So you can get paid to refer your mates. Is that what you're saying? Cool. Okay. So that's useful to kind of understand. And it seems that's quite sensible. So it's quite simple. It's enabling the referral, But one of the things I know you're quite passionate about, and you'd done some research on when I first met you, was about why we need to change the process almost. And it was a lot about trust, wasn't it? I think you talked at Silicon Roundabout about that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's talk a bit about that.
Yes, so in terms of research, one of the things that I was very mindful of was that I wanted to make sure that my thoughts around what was needed within recruitment weren't just my thoughts, but that they were based on independent research. There's a lot of research out there in recruitment. Often it's not quite as independent as it might appear, and I was quite keen to make sure that, again, with that transparency focus and making sure that people could trust it, in that we actually did the independent research focused on trust in recruitment. And so we hired an external agency to do that for us, and gave them some questions to ask a broad range of people. And one of the things that certainly came out quite strongly was that trust was very low within the industry. And specifically, we had some research that came back saying how as much or as low as 10% of people trust agencies to do a good job in terms of finding the right candidate for the right role, which is quite low in terms of it being quite a high value service.
It's extremely low. 90% of people don't, and they feel trapped then, that they don't have enough choice maybe.
Yes, yeah. And so so it was kind of like, okay, so it's not just me, and therefore, and this was also around algorithms and technology and our reliance on technology. And 90% of people that answered the survey said that they wanted HR solutions or HR to rely less on algorithms and more on people. And so again, that was key for us. We do have a platform, but it can be quite easy to start to look at these wonderful shiny solutions that will match candidates to roles, and you hear about AI all of the time automatically doing all of these things, but it's very much a black box, hard to understand what's inside, how is it working it out, is there any bias?
Yeah, but there's the thing, when I was looking into that, I think again for the same thing, the Silicon Roundabout thing, was actually finding that it's only as unbiased as the people programming it.
Absolutely.
So you could have as much bias built in, it's not automatically.
Yes, and the historical data that's been used for it to learn as well. So however it's been built and however it's learning, and even if, a lot of the ones actually, when you look behind the scenes, because I do obviously a lot of research on looking at what is out there, because I get really excited when I see something new that works well. But a lot of them there isn't really very much AI actually out there in the recruitment space. It's much more just a very standard matching technology that's happening. And so people don't want us to rely on that. There needs to be some element of friction in the process for people to actually trust it. And often we seem to go so much towards having a process that is so efficient that it's almost hands-free. You sort of put your job description in the machine at the beginning and out pop your candidates at the end, when actually that's, for some processes, that's fine. But for some which are so complex and based around people, it's really not a process that is going to be trusted by everybody if that's the process that we're relying on. And so there's some great work done by Rachel Botsman on trust around how you need to have certain friction points in a process for people to know where they are in it, what's signposted next, and to trust that they can go on to the next stage. And really also to transition their trust from old ways of doing things into new ways of doing things.
What would be an example of a friction point in this process?
So something whereby you might say, so within our process, for example, we will have some AI within the process where we will suggest people to members to recommend, but it will still be down to the member to recommend that candidate personally. So ultimately it will still be a person saying, yes, they were great at the role, rather than it just being a high volume of candidates that are put forward to a client without any human intervention. So there will always be a human in there that's reliable, and we can make sure that from a reputation basis that they're made accountable for the people that they're recommending.
I can see that you can try and do it with talent management, so you can do talent profiling inside an organisation.
Yes.
And make it all perfect and you've got that perfect candidate, but there's still there is a subjective aspect to things, or what is the person like in reality that you've got to make those judgment calls on. And what does good look like? Someone said to me the other day, well, if you had all that profile and they had a good 360 feedback or a good performance management review, then wouldn't that be the person that goes to the top of the queue for the succession planning? Well, I don't know, because what is a good 360?
Yes.
And that's where you still need this real...
We're complex individuals, and I don't think we can drill it down to scores and matching of algorithms. I mean, ultimately, sort of matching candidates and roles is Google's starting to do an awful lot of this, and it starts to get to the point where you will have candidates that know what clients are searching for. So you end up with candidates effectively having to do SEO on their own personal profile so that they can hire than other candidates, just in the same way as companies use SEO. And so then what are we going to use? And so it starts to become
back to your point about trust, it becomes almost more important so again, in terms of on platform, you almost need to make sure that the referrers are credible.
Yes, absolutely. And that's something that, in terms of the reputation side of thing was critical to the platform, that we could measure people's reputation and measure the quality of the people that they were recommending, so that then we can manage that on an ongoing basis and use that sort of reputation lever to make sure.
It's like TripAdvisor or eBay, isn't it? I mean, we really are. Amazon, you are affected by reviews, and but it needs to be a credible review.
Absolutely, and that's something that we absolutely have to focus on is making sure that our clients have the opportunity to say whether that's a great recommendation or not. And that can sometimes have very little to do with the candidate. So they may be a great candidate for a completely different role. So it's very much associated to the member that does the recommendation rather than the quality of the candidate.
Yeah, and because I can see that just a neutral recommender may not know your culture. So they can recommend something, but if you had an internal person that does, then they might be even more appropriate.
Yes, absolutely, yes.
So was there any other areas that came out in your research that people need to focus on, or?
Yeah, I mean, it was quite far-reaching in terms of the types of research that we did, but we looked at all sorts of things. We looked at different demographics, so different areas of the country and where trust is greater and trust is less.
Oh, really? Where is
that? So London was generally less trust.
They're really trusting in the north.
More so, yeah. And I think some of that is about perhaps more of a personal service that may be provided, and people getting to know one another on a different
say hello
level.
to each other in the streets, so maybe they distrust each other, or they look strangely if you do that down south.
And across different roles, and so where the roles are quite senior, sometimes there is higher trust because often they will have a trusted headhunter or a trusted person they will go to. But often for a lot of the managerial and sort of middle leadership type roles, it can be quite a challenge for those. So yes, there was quite a lot, and I'm happy to share links to the research freely.
We'll put links
with
onto
you.
The show notes. Absolutely, great, good. Okay, so in terms of overall, you're kind of the whole point is crowdsourcing talent. This is really about opening up the pool, which gives more opportunities to the individual, to the organisation. And you said there's also quite a lot in terms of diversity. I think you said about underrepresented demographics are more likely to come through something like this potentially.
Yes, absolutely. So we proactively curate the network. So we work with...
what does that mean?
Yeah, so it's one of those phrases that I chuck out there and then assume everybody knows, because I've used it a lot.
Curation's a really big word. It's like disruption. It's one of those words. Okay, so just tell me what that means.
So for us, it means that when we know that we have clients coming from certain industries or certain geographies, then we will proactively curate the network to make sure that we can fulfill the needs of that particular client. So for example, when we first had EasyJet, we knew that Luton was an area that we didn't have as many members in as we perhaps could do in order to help find great candidates for them. So we proactively worked in that area to make sure that people knew about us and had heard about us.
Right.
And so for us, it's the same.
Sort of teeing up your network to make sure that you're going to be able to get enough quality.
Yeah. So, and we can do that with everything, whether it's a particular geography or a particular skill, whether that's cybersecurity or marketing or technology. Wherever we know that we're talking to clients and wherever we know that there's a need, especially for our solution, then we'll be working to attract members from different pools. And whilst ever we're doing that, we also make sure that we work with underrepresented groups to make sure that we maintain this representation of society that we focus on. So we have links with women returners and disability groups.
Right, because I was going to say, I was going to challenge you there, is how would you say you're different from an agency then, who would say, we curate our network in your area, we've got lots of, so but is that because of these broader networks? How do you make sure that you are
we physically go and see people and go to meetup groups and work often, so like with the Women Returners website, we're on there as a website. We know we have a lot of people coming to us from there, a lot of whatever the underrepresented group is, we know that because we have a process whereby members recommend other members to join, we know that if we leave it, we'll be maintaining the status quo by the majority of our members being of a certain demographic. So we need to put more proactive effort into some areas to make sure that we maintain that balance. And so I work with an awful lot of groups outside of sort of the specific, whether it's a technology group I might turn up to, or cybersecurity, or whatever the meetup groups I go to try and find out who are the most influential people in the room and who are the people that are going to know great candidates for clients. It's also going along to lots of groups where there's underrepresented people from all the different ranges that you can imagine, and also working with those people to make sure that we've got the best process we can. So we mentioned PwC earlier, and they kindly hosted a roundtable for me where we brought in different people from different groups, so all underrepresented groups, and walked through the recruitment process end to end and got everybody in the room to redesign it, so that everybody basically said, okay, well, at this point, this would be a challenge for me, or that would be a challenge for me. And there were some fascinating things that came out of that, sort of, especially from groups that perhaps don't have as much of a voice, like those from a neurodiversity perspective, and the challenges that they might have with applying for roles or going through certain assessment centres, that kind of thing. And so it was fascinating. It was broader than our solution, but I was interested in the end-to-end process. And also, if you start to sort of look at the extremes of a process, then you can ultimately design it much better for everybody. And so that was what I was sort of fascinated by, was if it was all the extremes of a process designing this, then what would it look like, rather than it being designed for the 80% of society? What about if it was designed for the 20%?
Okay. So I suppose coming towards the end, in terms of what we're summarising here, I was thinking, if I'm an HR recruitment person in an organisation, or an SME anyway, but you wouldn't just switch using this. You want referrals, but what proportion of candidates would I want to get through this? And that's quite a hard question to ask. I don't know if you've got a sense of it's part of what you do. It's not everything, is it?
Absolutely. So I think we're part of an ecosystem. So we absolutely work alongside agencies. Often we work alongside very much employee referral platforms. We're expanding out to include employee referrals as part of that solution. So that's internal referral.
Yeah, of course. Yes. So that's. So I was going to ask you about that. So this is external pull, but it's logical you could use the same approach internally.
Yeah, so the way we see it work best, I guess, is where employers use employee referrals, and then if they can't find people through employee referrals, it can tip over into our network, where we can also share. As I say, we're expanding out into that, so we'll have the ability for people to have their employees within the system, and then it just tip over automatically to our external network. But really, we just introduce, our specialism is in finding people that are recommended, and we introduce those into internal recruitment teams. If there are other things that are needed, and there will be, whether that's agencies that can also help from an interviewing perspective, or psychometric testing, or all of the other range of solutions, then we're very much part of that ecosystem and use us alongside. So we don't have anything where we worry about who else is being included in the party. We're very much use us, and we'll also feed back things. We often hear from our members around feedback on specific roles and what they might need to change in order to make it more attractive, all of that kind of thing. So we very much work in partnership with internal recruitment.
You can attract more people as well.
Yeah, because our members are often more honest than the candidates will be, because they'll say, I wouldn't recommend my friend, but they're saying, actually they need more flexibility, or the salary is wrong, or, so they'll feedback.
That's
some
really
honest
helpful,
feedback.
actually,
It is, very much so.
So you get feedback on the role. So it's another solution that we might not have had in the past, which allows you to have more. Well, I was thinking it's like the sales analogy. It's more people in the funnel, which in the war for talent, you need you're going to get a better quality of candidate, hopefully, for your organisation, and it's better for them too. It's a better fit.
Yeah.
If you've got more people coming in the top, and actually referrals will potentially, maybe exactly as you're saying there, they'll be slightly honed. They're almost coming in further down the funnel because they already
there's an element of recommendation. You're more likely to know that when you go through any needing to get a recommendation, if you're happy with from an interview perspective and want to hire them, and you ask for referrals, then you already know that there's one there.
And I can see how it would work alongside other things that you do, because of the fact that it's about saving time. So again, in HR, our challenges are always, we get pushed into, good HR tech should save us admin time, right? So if you're spending all your time trying to either physically work the job boards in order to save money on agencies, this is a cost-effective way, which is less expensive than an agency, a bit more spend than a job board, but you're spending your time more effectively, and then you can put that energy into really excellent interviewing and analysing those candidates once they're sifted.
Absolutely, yes,
Okay, I like it. Okay, so that makes sense. So any final comments or advice to your HR uprisers in this space?
No, I think probably from my perspective, it's working in partnership with suppliers really helps, and that certainly helps us. We want to work with our clients to make the process better, continue to evolve it, and really that's how to get the best out of a lot of the new startups that are coming up now. Myself and others alongside me, we're all kind of really keen for people to use us and improve with us, and that's really important.
And there's a low barrier to entry though, isn't it? Because it's not like they have to invest in it to do it, so you could just try it and see, get your own name on there.
Absolutely.
I don't know what your HR curation's like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Try it out. Actually, we did someone on interims recently, so would you have interim roles on there?
Yes, permanent and contract interim roles, absolutely.
So it makes sense.
Absolutely.
Or there's not a lot to lose. Okay, so that wraps up this week's episode of the HR Uprising. It was really great to have Juliet Eccleston from AnyGood on here. Hopefully we all found it interesting, and any of the links that you heard alluded to, whether it's to AnyGood itself or the research, as ever, it'll be in the show notes. Please don't hesitate to get in touch through social media. I'll also put Juliet's contact details on as well, if you'd like to know more about what she's doing and her thoughts. And as ever, thanks so much for listening to the HR Uprising. Please do, if you're finding us useful, give us feedback, recommend us to your friends, subscribe. It's all very much appreciated. Thank you, and until next time.
Thank you for listening to the HR Uprising podcast. You can access more information, including resources or links mentioned in the show, at our website, www.hruprising.com. Also, you might want to join our LinkedIn community or tweet to us at HR Uprising. We'd love to hear from you.